Hey folks, today we are going to be exploring some of the most mainstream philosophical ideas, their most common perspective, and how they originated, including Canadian First Nation perspectives and philosophy. The three philosophical ideas I will be talking about are Stoicism, Nihilism, and Existentialism. I understand existentialism is more of a sect that can incorporate other forms of beliefs, and I'll talk about that. But for now, let's just call it its own belief. I would highly recommend indigenizing Canada, learning from Indigenous philosophy and identity with Ray Aldred to get a deeper understanding of Indigenous philosophy. This is the main source of information on First Nation philosophy I used. While I go along with this video, I want you to have in mind some of the core values of First Nation philosophies. Canadian Indigenous people have a strong sense of community, relationship with the Creator, relationship with creation, relationship with others, and relationship with oneself are ideas ingrained in Indigenous communities. These are fundamentals of Canadian Indigenous philosophies. Throughout this video, draw your own conclusions and parallels between what you think Indigenous philosophy is and these more mainstream philosophical ideas. First, we will talk about Stoicism. Now let's start all the way back in the beginning with a man named Zeno of Citium. Zeno was the founder of the Stoic philosophy. The story goes, Zeno was a wealthy merchant living in Athens. He's born around 1334 BC and died around 262 BC. As the legend goes, at one point in his life, he found himself sailing across the Mediterranean with all his wealth stored at the bottom of the ship. It might not have been his smartest move. Clouds rolled in, and he found himself in the midst of a storm. Storms in the Mediterranean weren't known as forgiving. And this could have been the end of him. His ship started taking on water, and when this happened, he knew his wealth would be long lost, and most likely his life. But Zeno miraculously survived. There's often a misconception on what Stoicism is. Maybe the average man is meant to be a Stoic. Maybe it's not to let the hardships of the world conquer you. But that is not what the founder and creator of Stoicism thought, nor his Stoic predecessors. Zeno, looking at what he had just lost, his exuberant wealth, he didn't throw a tantrum, he didn't even cry. As day turned into night, Zeno didn't sulk, but rather knew what he had to do. Stoicism isn't keeping feelings bottled up, nor is it making yourself feel nothing at all. Stoicism teaches a lot of things, but having an unhealthy coping mechanism is not one of them. Zeno looked at his life after the shipwreck. He picked himself up and he began anew. He knew he couldn't change what had happened, and that was okay with him. Sure, his life had just fallen apart, but he knew how to move forward. Stoicism, at its very core, emphasizes that while we cannot control external events, we can control our reaction to them. Stoicism teaches more than just how to battle hardships. It's also a belief on how to live. What are the virtues of Stoicism? Living in accordance with nature. This may sound simple, but the concept is more than meets the eye. When a dog is tied to a cart, if it wants to follow, it is pulled and follows, making its spontaneous act coincide with necessity. But if the dog does not want to follow, it will be compelled in any case. So it is with man too. Even if they don't want to, they will be compelled to follow what is destined. Zeno of Citium. Meaning we need to understand what is in our control. If something is out of our control, we will always be fighting a losing battle, and we will never win. Living in accordance with nature means someone that knows what they can change. For example, you got hit by a car. Now what? Can you make the car unhit you? No, you cannot. You may be pretty badly hurt, but how can you change it? You can't fight it, you can't control it. It is like fighting against the leash. No matter how hard you thrash, you are still pulled along, but it is harder to fight against an unstoppable force than move with it. Next, virtue. Live a virtuous life. One must live a virtuous life. By that, I mean living with a high moral standard. Don't crumble to pleasures, sex, money, and the comfort of the material world. Don't practice being virtuous only when others are around. That defeats the purpose. Rather, what Stoicism teaches is practice virtue even in isolation. A man isn't virtuous if he doesn't lead his life by example in the absence of an audience. The third virtue of Stoicism, using rationality and reason in problem solving. In my view of Stoicism, this doesn't exactly mean to think fully pragmatically, but rather using one's discretion in view of the problem at hand to pursue the outcome that is most desirable. From a Stoic mind, you should be able to put yourself in other people's shoes, understand perspectives, and then work through these issues rationally and with reason. Marcus Aurelius, likely the most profoundly known Stoic philosopher, thought that reason and rationality was virtues of a heart that could achieve a form of inner peace. The fourth virtue of Stoicism. These are the characteristics of a rational soul: self awareness, self examination, and self determination. It reaps its own harvest. It succeeds in its own purpose. That's a quote by Marcus Aurelius. What the former Roman emperor Marcus Aurelius meant by this was when a soul carries these virtues, that of self awareness, self examination, and self determination, you'll see yourself succeeding just because of these virtues you are instilling in yourself. Being self aware allows you to see your actions from almost a bird's eye view. The person that is self aware will be able to see their own interactions and behaviors and meditate on them, which leads to self examination. Being a person that can self examine will lead to being a person that can grow. A person who cannot examine their own heart and their own soul won't have the capacity for growth. And if we didn't have the capacity for growth, wouldn't we all still have the mind of toddlers? I saved self determination for last because it accompanies all of it. Self determination, in the broadest sense, is someone that can make their own decisions, set goals for the future, make sure that their actions align with their own values and morals, which then brings it all together and allows someone to become a strong, sovereign mind. Now, for my interpretation of Stoicism. How does the view of God fit into the Stoic world? The famous Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, or Zeno of Citium all believed in the idea of a divine providence. They believed that the world and the universe had a divine order that was not to be disregarded. The view of the Stoics is in tune with the teachings of Jesus, not putting faith in the material world, not to value sex, money, or any of the pleasures of the material world. The main virtue of Stoicism is living in accordance with nature. I interpret this as living in accordance with God, allowing Him to control my life and not meddle in things that I cannot change. Marcus Aurelius wasn't a Christian, but he did believe in the Roman gods. In his journals, now known as Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, he often talked about divinity. How far I've gotten into the book, what I can see is that most of his views align with the Christian faith quite well. What does it mean to be Stoic? I believe Stoicism is a highly misrepresented philosophical idea in today's world. When someone is called a Stoic, you probably think of a person that bottles up emotions and doesn't let themselves, quotations, feel. That's all wrong. Rather, let yourself feel the pain of the world, let yourself feel how badly it really hurts, but be able to still see what's in front of you and not what is behind you, and allow yourself to move forward and see what needs to be done to pick up the pieces of what has happened. And that's only the problem solving portion of Stoicism. It has other beliefs that align with the Bible, such as treat others how you want to be treated. So, again, no, it is not disregarding feelings, rather, a set of beliefs that make it a groundwork for a strong leader, a virtuous person, and someone that can overall battle what life throws at them. Nihilism, the belief in nothing. What is nihilism and why is it looked down upon? To a nihilist, life has no inherent meaning, no value, and no true stance of what is right and what is wrong. Morals are meaningless and they are subjective. They believe a meaning is a human made construct. The idea can give some people the sense of complete freedom, while others it can lead to despair. A couple of names are associated with nihilism, most predominantly Friedrich Nietzsche. However, most of his works were warning against the dangers of complete nihilism. Friedrich Nietzsche came from the time that was battling the idea of nihilism. His most famous quote says it perfectly: God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. Existentialism and nihilism are often linked, only to give a purpose out of nihilism. Friedrich Nietzsche is most famously known for this. He believed in a meaningless existence with no inherent value, but the creation of our own subjective meaning is where his idea of the Übermensch was born. A lot of people think that this was Friedrich's view of the world, but when you look closer, you see that it was a warning. He was not rejoicing in the fact that people had forgotten faith. It was that people had lost their meaning in life. And with his idea of the Übermensch, translated to Overman or Superman, he tried to make this God space into something once more. That's why I would accredit him to existentialism more than nihilism. Friedrich's Übermensch was seen as a goal, not a destination. The Übermensch was a person that had conquered their own mind and their own soul, strong willed and an overcomer that could overcome almost anything and could live with the immense suffering of the world. As Friedrich says, man is a rope tied between beast and overman, a rope over an abyss, a dangerous across, a dangerous on the way, a dangerous looking back, a dangerous shuddering and stopping. That's from Friedrich Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. A dangerous across, meaning life is never easy. A dangerous on the way, stating that the way to the overman is not without hardship and pain. A dangerous looking back, telling us that when we look in the past, we often get caught up in what we can't change now, and it can make us fall. And Nietzsche's last warning about a dangerous shuddering and stopping means that it's dangerous for us to stand still and never try to pursue the overman or pursue anything greater than what we are now, disregarding growth. So, what the most predominant nihilist philosophers can tell us is that, that nihilism without a creation of meaning is unsuitable for life. We need a meaning. Without it, we wander and are aimless. A life without meaning likely leads to depression, immaturity, and being incapable of handling life's inevitable suffering. Existentialism, existence of the individual and subjectivity. When talking about existentialism, you can't forget Soren Kierkegaard, known as the father of existentialism. Existentialism is a huge sect of philosophy, so I will try to cover the basics and how it came to be. Soren believed in three stages of life. Number one, aesthetic. When talking about the aesthetic stage of life, the philosophy of hedonism often comes up. Hedonism, pursuit of pleasures. When talking about Soren's idea of the first stage of life, the aesthetic stage, hedonism has to be brought up, a philosophy of itself Kierkegaard believed we all went through. A time in one's life that the idea of community is foreign, the idea of responsibilities to one another hasn't yet been discovered. The only thing that matters is the seeking of pleasures of the material world. The aesthetic stage of life isn't a belief in hedonism, rather, practicing what they teach without even knowing. Life at this stage is focused solely on pleasures, like music, seduction, and drama, and social events like partying. Soren Kierkegaard saw the aesthetic stage of life as unfulfilling, lacking deeper meaning. True meaning starts to come through the ethical stage of life. The second stage, the ethical stage. The ethical stage of life begins when the individual starts seeing themselves as part of something bigger, starting to recognize being part of a community, seeing societal constructs, begins distinguishing what is right and what is wrong, recognizes their responsibility to others, caring for their family and their friends, in recognizing those who rely on you. Your life is now more than your appetite for pleasures. You're now adhering to personal values, societal norms, and what you believe is good and evil. The ethical stage of life makes life much more meaningful. Last and final stage of life, the religious stage. The religious stage of one's life begins when you start to see yourself as an insignificant pawn in an infinite game of chess, the infinite universe God has created. The meaning of this stage is to develop a complete and utter faith in God. Once you have done this, you have entered the most meaningful stage of one's life. Kierkegaard mentioned the idea of a leap of faith into the absurd. His use of the phrase leap of faith into the absurd means the difficulty of coinciding rationality and complete faith in God. The religious stage emphasizes the recognition that you are unknowing of the true nature of the universe. It's the acceptance of something much greater than you that knows much more than you. Not everyone enters the religious stage in life, but Soren believed this was the stage that gave the most meaning to life. To Kierkegaard, religion was the recognition of a metaphysical power in the universe. However, religion was quite personal. He believed one's faith in this power transcended any prior stage of life. To explain this, Kierkegaard used the biblical story of Abraham and Isaac. Abraham, going against all of the ethics and societal norms he believed in, he had the faith in God that transcended these parts of him, and he was willing to kill his son based on the faith he showed to the creator of the universe. Although Kierkegaard's strong belief in Christianity, he didn't believe in what he named Christendom. He believed the crowd of Christianity was untrue, that the church wasn't a true place of God. He believed the extremely personal relationship with God allowed the subjectivity of individualism with a personal view of the Creator. Existentialism virtues. Unlike nihilism, which is the true belief in absolutely nothing, existentialism leaves the meaning of life up for interpretation. The basis of all existentialism is the subjectivity of the individual. Existentialists believe that humans are radically free and we are nothing more than what we make ourselves. A quote by the famous existentialist philosopher Jean Paul Sartre: "Man is nothing else than what he makes himself." I believe this thought is the basis for existentialism. Existentialists also believe in adhering to one's subjective morals, solving problems and conflicts in a way that aligned with your moral self. Think with reason and rationality, but not in a fully pragmatic sense. A pragmatic thinker will solve problems in the most logical and rational way of doing it. However, an existentialist thinker will think rationally and logical, but then ask the question, does this align with what I believe in, with who I am, and my meaning? The meaning of life to an existentialist is completely subjective. The most famous ideas from existentialist philosophers are Friedrich Nietzsche, Übermensch, where the meaning of life is to work towards the ideal version of yourself, the ultimate overcomer, strong willed, and with minimal humility. But again, it was never a destination you could reach. The meaning of life came from trying to become the Übermensch. Soren Kierkegaard's view thought that the proper relationship with God was the final stages of life, in the ultimate meaning of life. Stoicism and First Nation philosophies. I believe the biggest parallel that can be drawn between the philosophies I have covered and First Nation philosophies is Stoicism. A strong sense of divine providence, treating others as you'd want to be treated, humility, and relationship with oneself are commonalities between the two. Although living in accordance with nature in the Stoic philosophy is a little complex, it does still mean to have a connection with the world, which in First Nation philosophy is the foundation. Nihilism and First Nation philosophies. They are radically different views of life. Nihilists have the belief that life revolves around nothing, that they are radically free beings, and the universe is indifferent to us. Whereas, for a First Nations person, life revolves around community. Certain things in life are predestined by a creator. Connection to the land is a direct connection to the creator of the universe. They have the belief in four kinds of relationship between the creator and us, and through the First Nations lens, relationship with spiritual beings as well, relationship with creation in us. We are children of the earth. Relationship with one another, not just one person to another, but rather group relations as well. Relationship with oneself is more than a relationship with just our mind. We have a body, we have emotions. This all falls under the Hebrew idea of the heart, meaning all of us. Existentialism and First Nations philosophy. Existentialism is focused a lot on the idea of free will and subjectivity. First Nations do believe in the idea of free will, however, the idea that a divine creator acts definitively and continuously are differences between the two ideologies. Subjectivity of the meaning of life is somewhat true and somewhat not true for First Nations. They believe that some things are inherently predestined by a creator, and that community and stewardship of the land, along with relationship to the land, is the driving sense of meaning. Whereas for existentialists, the meaning is fully subjective. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope that Mr. Dunwald, you didn't get too bored, and I hope everyone that watched this didn't get too bored. It was a lot of information, and my brain hurts, but I am proud of myself for making this and doing the research that I did. Um, I wish I could have gotten more in depth in some places, but